Hello, everybody. I just want to do a quick mic check. Make sure you can hear me loud and clear. I hope that you enjoyed the music. It seems from the comments like you did. That is Every Day is Night from VA Hall 11. Welcome, everybody. Just want to make sure I'm not too loud. Everything sounds good. If we want to adjust, this is the best opportunity. Otherwise, we are jumping right into this. Let's see if the scene transition works. Yes, it does. Hi, guys. What's it called? Which way is it? It's this way. The text on this screen is a little messed up still, but we will get it working eventually. On the main screens, it works, and that's what we're happy about. So yeah, welcome everybody. There's 30 people watching right now, which is kind of insane given that we haven't gotten these streams to be quite regular yet, but that is totally fine. There's no housekeeping. There's nothing fancy, and I see so many people saying hello. Aki-san, 1940, welcome to the stream. G-Money Better Pay, welcome. Tom Yoda, Clemius Clem, Bellatag, Ask Toast, Aki-san again, Anik Tinik, I'm so sorry if I'm pronouncing your names wrong. Z Danek, say hi everybody, I'll say your names. Lol23, TS7, SB, Orange Horns, Ask Toast, Lol23, God, I'm so glad you guys are here. Thank you so much. If this is your first stream, welcome. We want to try to get these regularly in Tuesday afternoons, but we also have a series moments away from coming away. Yeah, actually, the series we are covering in these streams, it is so close to releasing, and today we are going to cover the last episode of it, part 4, on this lecture. So again, if this is your first time, you guys can ask questions at any time during the stream. I promise I'm reading 99% of the comments, and if it's really clear I missed yours, just ask it again. I will do my best to get around to you guys, and then at appropriate points I will stop to answer your questions. Also, if you guys have not seen the podcast yet, just go to the channel, look at our most recent videos, because what we do is we take these streams and turn them into podcast episodes, and your question might be featured on that podcast. So yeah, welcome everybody. I am so excited. This is the last episode of the series that is going to come out probably weeks from now. And yeah, before we get right into the script, there's just one thing I have to say, and it's that on our last stream, or the one before it, someone pointed out that every American president that the Whigs got elected into office died in office. And I'm like, that might actually be true. So I had to look it up. And it's true. Every Whig president who got elected died in office. So they only got 2 elected into office, right? They got William Henry Harrison, who died after 30 days, and he got replaced by John Tyler, who was barely even a Whig, and John Tyler serves out the rest of his term. And then the only other Whig who actually gets elected into office is Zachary Taylor, who also dies, I think this time 3 months into his office. Oh, no, this is more like a year. And then he gets replaced by Millard Fillmore. But whereas John Tyler was barely a Whig and kind of messed up the party's agenda, Fillmore was actually a pretty committed Whig, and he actually ends up being a very, very important president, which we will see by the end of the stream. So yeah, let's get into our actual script. Oh my God, there's almost 40 of you. Jesus Christ. I better not say anything embarrassing, because otherwise I'm never going to be able to live it down. Let's see if there's any questions. How big is the team? Including myself, it's got to be 9 or 10 people, but we have people kind of leaving and going and temporary contractors and stuff. Maximum of 15, I'd say, thereabouts. Zetanex says you think Mando likes me, but I don't see Mando in the chat. I might be mistaken. Oh, there you go. Might really be Mando. Yep. No, I think he does like me. Excited for that new episode? Yes, it's all coming out soon. Can't believe JFK was wearing a wig. What's a wig? That was one of America's first political parties, who are very important during the 1840s, which is when this series is taking place. All right. So yeah, there's actually a lot of people asking about what the Whig Party was. So if you saw our series on the War of 1812, America started with 2 political parties. The first was the Republicans. That's what they were called, the Republicans. It is not the same Republican Party we have today. So to prevent confusion, we call them the Democratic Republicans, and their opponents were the Federalists. And by the end of the War of 1812, both of these parties get themselves to these wacky shenanigans that gets the Federalists destroyed, and literally America just has one big Democratic Republican uniparty for a decade. Obviously, having just one party isn't going to work out. They start infighting, and the parties just completely separate out, and that becomes 2 new parties. The first are the Democrats, founded by Andrew Jackson, that is this gentleman right here, and yes, that is the very same Democrat Party we have to this day, and their rivals are the Whigs. And yeah, these are the political parties. So if you recall from our last episode, the Mexican-American War has begun. The Americans have pushed deep into Mexico. Santa Anna is returned from his exile and becomes the president of Mexico. But despite the Americans achieving basically all their war goals, the war isn't over. Santa Anna is refusing to surrender and fighting is ongoing. So the Americans need to find a way to end the war. Let me see the comments here. Why did they get called Democratic Republicans? Why not some other means? What happened to it? I think I just explained all of that. In what other countries other than Britain was there anything analogous to a Whig party or even the British Whig party, different piece? Okay, so the American Whigs and the British Whigs were really unlike each other. Their policies were in many ways borderline opposite, but the people who founded America's Whig party kind of liked the British Whig party, so they borrowed the name. And like, in some ways they were similar, but like, I don't want to get into all the nuance theirs. Okay, so let's talk about the actual script we have here. Last week, we followed American forces as they occupied Mexico's frontiers, pushed deep into its national core, and witnessed the return of Santa Anna as Mexico's president for, quite possibly the 10th time based on how you count it. Under his leadership, Mexico refuses to surrender. Oh, Lowell, you're heading out? Thank you so much for joining the stream. This was becoming a problem for America's President Polk. Though he promised to only serve a single term, he still wanted his successor to be a Democrat. So as you can see here, President Polk, this gentleman right here, is a Democrat, succeeding John Tyler, who was formerly a Whig but got kicked out of the party for not being Whiggish enough, and he wants a Democrat to be his successor. As you can see here on the list of U.S. presidents, that does not happen. The next president is a Whig, and we get into what happens. So he promises to only serve one term, and he wants his successor to be a Democrat. But between the war dragging on, the return of the slavery issue destabilizing national politics, and the rise of the ambitious Whig, General Zachary Taylor, as the war's greatest hero, that was seeming less likely. If you recall, a huge battle happens at, I believe, Monterrey, and Zachary Taylor, who's a Whig, wins the battle, and he's outnumbered 4-1, and it's like this huge victory that just makes him this national household name, and Polk is not happy that he made this Whig super famous. So he needs to, 1, end the war, and 2, do it in a way that won't make Zachary Taylor more famous and popular. So luckily, Polk had a solution to most of these problems. A new commander, just as talented as Taylor, who could lead an ambitious military operation to finally bring the war to a victorious close. The Mexican-American War is about to reach its final climactic chapter. The fate of North America's two great republics is about to be decided. Phillips Kai Bob wants a video on the Schleswig War. So there wasn't going to be a dedicated video about it, but it is going to crop up in a future video we do. Aren't the US Whigs more like the UK Tories? I would say they're closer to the Tories for sure. But again, American politics is so different from British politics by this stage. President Polk is the GOAT, says 23 Unkball. 1 term and he accomplished everything he wanted and died right after leaving office. Based. Yeah, no, that's pretty much how we assess him too. He probably was one of America's most successful presidents. So then we go to D-Day. So let me pull up a map for you guys of how the Mexican-American War is going so far. There's a very good map of this. So if you're listening to the podcast and aren't able to take a look, the modern-day American Southwest from New Mexico to California is all Mexican territory, and the Americans have basically all of it. And also the Americans have pushed onto a city called Monterrey, which is in northeastern Mexico, both at the time and in the modern day. So a very good chunk of Mexico is under American occupation now, and also the Americans are pushing like deep into Mexican core territory. But like Mexico City is still, I think, hundreds of miles south, and like the Mexicans are just refusing to surrender. So we have part 2 of the script, D-Day. America's new plan to end the war was ambitious. Oh, I used the word ambitious twice. That's not good. It was ambitious. An amphibious... Oh, no, I don't. I misread amphibious as ambitious. Okay, let's start that again. America's plan to end the war was ambitious. An amphibious invasion of Veracruz, followed by a 200-mile march up the Royal Road to the capital at Mexico City. To make sure Taylor couldn't take any of the credit, remember, he doesn't want Taylor running for president, President Polk, this new front would be commanded by General Winfield Scott. Though also a Whig, Scott had little popular appeal and seemed more interested in army reform than politics. So Taylor, one of the reasons Polk is feeling threatened is that he's a very political guy. This other general, Winfield Scott, he's also a veteran of the War of 1812, if I recall. He doesn't care that much about politics. He just wants to make America's army good. So Taylor was called Old Rough and Ready, a practical frontier soldier who fought the Creek and Seminole. But Scott was Old Fuss and Feathers, a student of European warfare interested in discipline and European-style army reform. So if you recall from episode 3, Taylor, as he's pushing deeper into Mexico, he is letting his men pillage and loot, both because, one, they're being constantly attacked by guerrillas, but also, like, Taylor's just kind of a practical guy who knows that's sort of the way war is, right? Soldiers expect to loot. They expect to be rewarded for their service, and he's not too bothered about this. Scott, however, thinks that is a bad idea. He thinks that is eroding discipline. He thinks it makes America look bad on the world stage. The soldiers have to be disciplined. They have to treat civilians properly. And also, harassing those civilians, on the one hand, maybe it stops guerrillas, but on the other hand, those civilians aren't going to supply you now. So there's very different attitudes to the way these men command armies. Scott envisioned a bold, methodical campaign, which, unlike Taylor, would feature no looting or harassment of civilians. A, quote, civilized war, as he called it. One that would prove to the world that the American army could effectively project power anywhere in the world. So America is fighting a frontier war right now. If you're France, if you're Britain, you're not that impressed by this. But if they land an army in Veracruz, which is like hundreds of miles down the coast, and then supply that army as it marches all the way deep inland to Mexico City, that is a world-class military operation. And no one thinks the Americans can do it. And he wants to prove the Americans can. So if you recall, Taylor's up in the north with most of the American army. Scott was allowed to take whatever forces he wanted from Taylor, which is why he was so weak when Santa Anna attacked at Buena Vista. Again, there's this huge battle between Santa Anna and Taylor has this teeny tiny army at the time, and the reason is that all these troops were being taken from Taylor for Scott's campaign. But Taylor is such a good commander, and the Americans are such tough soldiers, and frankly, Mexico is so dysfunctional that like they still can't win the battle, even though they outnumber Taylor like 4-1. Not wanting their violence or indiscipline to ruin his campaign, Old Fuss and Feathers left the brutal Texas Rangers behind with Taylor. So if you recall, one of the forces Taylor brings in are the Texas Rangers, who are like these really tough frontier soldiers who are not above looting and pillaging and stuff. And Taylor intentionally brings them in to stop the Mexican guerrillas. But Scott is like, no, civilized campaign. You're not allowed to loot and pillage anymore. You stay up with Taylor, make him look bad. But there was another even more unruly unit Scott chose to leave behind, a formation whose entire membership has been court-martialed several times over, yet somehow continues to exist, the Unsubscribed Viewer Battalion. So then we trashed on the unsubscribed viewers, awful people. Like, listen, if you're watching this channel and you can't even hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell, what's wrong with you? Like, can you dress yourself in the morning? Pathetic. Hit that subscribe button or you will be destroyed. Anyway, moving on March 22nd, 1847, 12,000 men, and not a single unsubscribed viewer, set sail for Veracruz. They arrived on March 9th. The force landed at Caledo Beach on, for the first time in American history, 65 made-for-purpose landing craft. It was a very well-prepared operation. And I promise, guys, I will be reviewing comments shortly for questions. In just 6 hours, 8,600 men with their supplies, artillery, horses, and equipment were landed, and without the loss of a single life. I want to point out, like, this is the 1840s. Any naval invasion is an extremely deadly affair. I don't mean the enemy's going to be shooting at you, because the Mexicans weren't opposing this landing. I mean simply getting your men, many of them don't know how to swim, off of your ships, onto little boats, rowing them to shore, and like none of them dying. That is an insane achievement. Like, remember, like, you got to bring horses on these boats. You got to bring cannons. These things are tipping over. They can easily fall over, and these guys don't know how to swim. They'll drown. I remember that, like, in the preparation for World War II, before World War II was fought, the American army was really small and really badly funded. And like, frankly, like, because today Americans love their military. At the time, the army was like really looked down upon. And as it was looking like America might join the Second World War, the US Army starts doing these like exercises in really difficult environments. They start running around the state of New York, seeing if they can cross rivers, or camping out in the swamps of Mississippi to like prepare for military combat, right? And when they were doing river crossings in New York, I think like 2 or 3 US soldiers died crossing these rivers. And this is the 1940s. And like, again, the whole point I'm getting at here is like, these are extremely difficult military operations. Just to move soldiers across the river, people can die doing that. And here they are in the 1840s, landing thousands of men with soldiers and horses and not losing a thing. So moving on, Veracruz, defended by about 3,400 Mexican soldiers, was surrounded and bombarded with heavy guns taken from the ships. The city surrendered 12 days later on March 29th. Taking Mexico's key port only cost Scott 80 casualties. Remember, casualties isn't killed, it's also wounded. That's not 80 people dead, that's 80 people dead and wounded. Very impressive. And by the way, a very famous name, Robert E. Lee, really distinguished himself as, was either an army engineer or an artillery officer, where he dragged America's cannons to like these really good positions on top of hills and mountains that were hard to reach, and that was part of why they took Veracruz so quickly. A lot of big names from the Civil War distinguished themselves during the Mexican campaign. Veracruz would serve as Scott's supply hub for the rest of the campaign. Just as Old Fuss and Feathers intended, the army acquitted itself admirably, neither looting the city nor mistreating its people. But ahead of them lay 260 miles of mountains, ravines, jungles, and deadly heat. And at its end was a city that had not been conquered by an outside power since the conquistadors centuries before. In 1521. Oh my God, there's 56 people watching this stream. All right. So let's answer questions before we continue on with the script. So there's a lot of questions about the Whigs. I'm very sorry, guys, but I'm going to go past those because they're really not the point of this. What was the administration's state of management of the Mexican frontline territories like? They barely had any. So the Mexicans had like a couple of cities and outposts they controlled, but a lot of the territory was either outright uninhabited or controlled by Native Americans who really, really, really disliked the Mexicans. I actually don't mention this in the script, and I regret not mentioning it, but like the Apache in particular, I don't know about the Comanche, but the Apache, like a lot of their chiefs like went up to the U.S. military and was like, hey, we hate the Mexicans too. Let's kill Mexicans together. And the U.S. military is like, let's do it. So the Apaches were like, okay, the Apaches are not like a people or a state, right? Like it's individual local leaders doing it. So it's not like the entire Apache people are involved, but like a lot of them on their own like local basis, government system, whatever it is, voluntarily fought for the Americans. And that did not turn out well for them. It did not turn out well at all. They were treated very poorly after the war, but that is a problem for later. The Whigs were significantly less anti-slavery than the Republicans. One of the reasons the Republican Party happens, actually, is that at this time, they kind of managed to resolve the slavery issue for a while. And as the slavery issue comes back, the Whig Party and the Democrat Party actually both kind of have an internal dispute over it. And all the Whigs, or most of the Whigs, end up becoming Republicans. Was it true Abraham Lincoln was against the Mexican-American War? Yes, we discussed that in episode 3. This is episode 4, and we get all into the spot resolutions. All I'll say here is that, like, it was actually a really embarrassing incident for Abraham Lincoln because he was making a really, really hair-splitting point that wasn't even true. And like, if his point was true, it would be very questionable if he was even loyal to the United States. Like, he was kind of implying that America was fighting this war for unjust reasons, but the supposedly unjust reasons were true. Like, when the podcast episode comes back, you'll be able to see all this. Or you can watch the previous stream. By the way, guys, all of these stream recordings are available in a playlist that you can watch at any time. Let me dig that up for you guys. So the streams themselves are unlisted, but the recording is in a playlist that is not unlisted. So you can see all of them right here. All right, so next question. What does occupation mean in this context? Are there cities, towns, railroads being garrisoned, or did the army basically march as one? Basically, like, the Mexicans barely control this territory, but the few parts they do control, like, again, a city, like, I don't think there's any railroads here at the time, but, like, if there's a city or, like, a church outpost or something, like, there'll be, like, a Mexican flag and 3 Mexican soldiers defending it, and then, like, 50 Americans would show up, capture the 3 Mexican soldiers, take down the Mexican flag, put up the American flag, and it's American now. Ezekiel, so this is from Philipski Bob. Ezekiel, I'm a huge fan. I love the way you pronounce Philipski Bob. It's pronounced in Danish, so I understand, and I love your vids. They're really entertaining, and I always watch many of them. Thank you so much for saying so, and I'm glad you can make it to the stream, man. What was the difference in equipment and supply on the ground like between each side? That one we cover in way more depth in the previous episode, but for the most part, Mexico was an extremely corrupt and dysfunctional country, and many of its soldiers lacked, like, ammunition or shoes or food, while America, despite fighting a war so close from home, like, the supply situation wasn't great for the Americans, but it was not terrible. Oh my God, I missed a super chat. I'm so sorry, Cavalier17. But to answer your question, yes, I am wearing a ponytail. I actually got to get a haircut real bad. It's getting a little long and unruly, but I think it is at least acceptable for now. But yeah, thank you so much for the contribution. And by the way, guys, these are the scripts we turn in to our full series. And to make even a single episode can cost thousands of dollars. So if you guys want to help us make these scripts into a reality, you can super chat here or become a channel member, or the best option is to become a supporter on callmeezekiel.store, which, if the bot is working, should be putting a link up right now. Yeres Acker says, the last video you made that was an animation was 3 months ago about Bonaparte. When's the next one? So we are going over the script for the next series now. It should be coming out, like, it should be weeks away at most. We're currently targeting the end of this month or like the first week of next month at the absolute soonest. But it's going to be 4 episodes and they're releasing weekly, and we are super excited for it. All right, so what else? M-Man asks, what up, Zeke? I'm feeling pretty good. I'm so glad he can make it to the stream. Giello Auditore says, surprised they didn't lose anyone, not even the usual sickness like malaria or scurvy. Oh, don't worry. The army will start losing people very soon. Philipski Bob. Oh, yes, he's going on the same point. Yaris Acker says, the last video of... Sorry, the YouTube comment thing is kind of weird. It put me up without me realizing it. Did I know Santa Anna had a funeral for his leg? Yes, we cover that in quite a bit of detail, actually. Yo, the inland campaign wasn't going to be that tough. You win at Puebla, you win your way in. France lost there. We didn't. I don't know if I fully agree with that. The inland campaign was genuinely one of the most remarkable military feats of the time. It is extremely difficult to march an army through unfamiliar territory, supplying it via sea, while being attacked by guerrillas the whole time. It was a very, very impressive campaign, I think. And like most people at the time did not think it was going to work. At this time, non-combat casualties, mostly disease, outnumbered combat casualties. How did the U.S. and Mexican armies respectively handle disease and climate issues for their men? Great streams. That is a question by Carson McCorkle, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So, for the most part, logistics at the time was quite primitive. The Mexicans were reliant almost entirely on camp followers, which is to say that, like, there would be, like, random merchants following the army around, or, like, even the wives and the daughters and the sisters of the soldiers, and, like, they would cook, and they would clean, and they would do whatever else, or the soldiers would, like, break into a local village and steal their things, or maybe these villages sympathetic, and they give their things voluntarily. The Americans had a slightly more formal system in place, but they, too, also used camp followers. How do the videos cost thousands? Well, these productions involve myself and 9 other people, and we are all professionals. There was a professional video editor. There were several professional artists. I am a professional. I do a lot of things. I do production, I do voiceover, I do research, I do writing. And like, to pay a team of 10 people, it's very expensive. And by the way, these videos should cost tens of thousands. I'm just, 1, insanely good at budgeting. 2, I pay myself basically nothing. And 3, a lot of the team either like, they work overseas, so they're willing to work for more moderate wages, or some of them even like take pay cuts just to work for us. Because 1, like, I think we have a really good work environment for the team, and like that's honestly worth a lot. But 2, like, this is really cool stuff we get to work on. Like, if you're an artist, you could work in advertising, which maybe you don't care that much about, or you can work in like graphic design for some corporation or whatever else. And like, it's good work, but like it's not fulfilling. Whereas here we're making content, educating thousands of people, showing people about the world, really enriching people's lives, I think. And I think it's all very, very valuable work that everyone's passionate about. But again, like, remember, every single frame in this series is hand drawn, and then an animator has to animate, and I need to spend hundreds of dollars on books for research, and my time is also worth money because I gotta pay rent, I gotta eat food. I'm sorry, guys. If I could do this for free, I would. But yes, if anyone's willing to support us, it's hugely, hugely helpful. And on top of that, like, listen, even if it's for $5 a month, which is our entry level tier, 1, every dollar helps. It really does. But 2, you will be showing the world there is a passionate community of people who really love and care about history and want to see more of it. Especially given, like, there's like AI slop flooding YouTube right now, which is like garbage AI animations, poor research, or outright misinformation. And like, it's just terrible. And like, do you want to see more of that for free, or are you willing to go the extra mile to help us really make this stuff? And for those of you who can't support us, that is totally fine. I completely understand it. You have to support yourself first. But like, if there's even a little thing you do for us, share the videos with your friends, show up to the streams, encourage other people who maybe are a little better off to support us, whatever you can. Like, I promise. Or like, hey, maybe you're not doing so well financially right now. Like, if you're between jobs, we'll be waiting for you when you're all set. But yeah, you guys all get the point. Thank you so much for that little grandstand on my soapbox. I'm going to answer a few more questions, and then we are going to get back to the script. Did Mexico have a regimental system like the US and UK, or was it a central army that recruited from everywhere? I don't know about their formal military, but their broader military was kind of all over the place. Like, they had local militias, and they had a professional force, which I don't know if it was on a regimental basis. And like, by this stage in the war, tons of civilians are just picking up guns and taking pot shots at the American soldiers. Am I ever going to touch the topic about the Arab revolt or Islamic empires like the Umayyads or Ottomans? I would love to cover those, but I have no plans right now. I feel like a second Sino-Japanese war series would go hard. Certainly not against it, would like to cover it, just no plans now. Ezekiel, I convinced a friend to become a history nerd like me, so I'm going to send the vids and my channel. Thank you so much, Philip. I really appreciate that. Oh, Darillion, what was the question? Have I ever considered the car list wars? Yes, I want to cover those. No concrete plans now. And Yaris Acker asks, is this about the Mexican-American War? Is that what the next series is about? Yes. So again, like just because guys seem to be missing it, this is the script for our next series, which at this rate is weeks away. This is the last of the 4 episodes. So let's continue on. At this stage, I show off the merchandise. I already grandstanded enough to you guys, but I will show you our awesome sticker sheet. They look so good. We have here Andrew Jackson, Old Hickory, Santa Anna's foot, putting your best foot forward, and 2 little Santa Annas in cute and fun little poses. They're not available in the store yet, but they will be by the time the series releases. So yeah, let's continue with the script. Feel free to ask questions as we go, and I'll answer them once we finish this section. But first, a quick sip from my drink so my throat doesn't explode. All right. Following his defeat at Buena Vista, Santa Anna returned to Mexico City, where he desperately held the Mexican war effort together. So remember, he just lost at Buena Vista against Taylor, which is far to the north, and he is retreating back towards, I believe it's Mexico City, and he is trying to hold the Mexican war effort together. He portrayed the Battle of Buena Vista, a costly draw at best, as a major victory, parading his war trophies because he captured a bunch of gun banners and cannons to prove that he won the battle, and claiming it stopped Taylor's army from marching deeper into Mexico, which is not true. Taylor's all his forces were taken from him for Scott's campaign. Spinning the loss at Veracruz, however, was impossible. Oh, and Bavaria YT, thank you so much for the super chat. I def need the money. Keep up the good work. I'm loving the stream. Thank you so much, man. It's really appreciated. Through March and early April, Santa Anna prepared to confront the invasion at Cerro Gordo. It was good defensive ground, a steep defile where the road twisted through canyons flanked by cliffs. His 9,000 men were placed with artillery at every known approach. It was a good plan, but ruined by sheer bad luck when American engineers found a previously unknown foot trail that led around his defenses. So it's going to be hard to give you guys a visual for this one, but I will pull up the campaign. And for those of you listening on the podcast, God, why are Wikipedia's maps all like this? I think this will work. Okay, so they land at Veracruz, they go to Jalapa, and then I think a little bit west of Jalapa is Cerro Gordo. So by this stage, I think they're about 100 miles from Mexico City, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. They're very far from the coast now. And Santa Anna finds this great defensive position, and it's actually very plausible he'll win the battle. And America, again, their officer corps especially is really impressive. And I think it's Robert E. Lee, again, who found the foot trail leading around the defenses. And Santa Anna just gets annihilated here. It's actually really bad. On the morning of April 18th, American forces stealthily crept up the hidden path and around Santa Anna's army. By the time he realized what was happening, it was too late. Mexican troops were panicked by American artillery they believed would never hit them. So America's artillery was especially impressive and powerful during the war, and the Mexicans were quite terrified of it by this point. And one of the reasons Santa Anna picked this position is so his men would not get hit by that artillery. And now they're getting hit by the artillery, and they're freaking out, and the main American attack comes, and it's just really bad. Scott's army only suffered 400 casualties, while inflicting thousands on Mexico and capturing 3,000 soldiers. Santa Anna himself barely escaped the disaster on a mule and had to leave his prosthetic leg behind to the confusion. I believe this prosthetic leg can be seen in the Illinois State Military Museum right now. Victory in hand, Scott led his army into Mexico's second largest city of Puebla on May 15th. There, he continued to impose discipline, forbidding looting and harassment of civilians. But outside the city was a different story. Scott started to face the same guerrilla resistance that had plagued Taylor's campaign. Luckily, Scott could turn to Taylor for the solution. So even Scott, this really formal soldier, old fuss and feathers, the student of European warfare, even he's having to put, I don't want to say his principles behind, because there's practical reasons he does not want looting. It's bad for discipline. But these guerrillas are such a problem, and frankly, it's really hard to stop guerrillas without being kind of brutal. I think I said this previously, but in ancient Roman times, you didn't usually hear about guerrilla warfare. And the reason is that guerrillas would hide out in local civilian populations. That's what makes you a guerrilla, right? You're mixing your combatants with the civilians, which is considered a war crime today. If you tried that in Roman times, they're not going to humor that. They're going to say oh, you're hiding out in the villages? Cool. We're going to burn every village in a 100-mile radius, and you're going to have nowhere to hide. And are we killing tons of innocent people? Sure, but we're the Romans. We don't really care. And at this time, the Americans are willing to do some pretty brutal things, right? They're driving the Native Americans out of their homes and stuff. But even the Americans feel a little uncomfortable doing this. But here, the military situation's getting so bad with the guerrillas harassing their supply lines, because they got to bring these supplies in. I think it's got to be 100 miles from Veracruz now, right? The supplies load up in New Orleans or wherever else. They sail it to Veracruz. Then it has to go up these winding paths while Mexicans are attacking you. He can't have it. The military situation's going to fall apart. So we have a really funny skit here, which you'll see in the actual episode it releases. But what the point is that Old Fuss and Feathers may not have liked the brutal methods of the Texas Rangers, but he could not deny their effectiveness. If he was going to take Mexico City, the supplies had to flow. The Texas Rangers were not the only new arrivals at Puebla. On May 6, 1847, President Polk's chief negotiator arrived, Nicholas Philip Trist. He is a very important character. Chief clerk at the State Department. I know chief clerk does not sound like an impressive job, but that's only 1 or 2 levels below Secretary of State as I understand it. It's just not a fancy sounding title. Although, I don't know, maybe at the time clerk was considered an impressive title. I don't know. His instructions were to settle the Texas border at the Rio Grande, by California and New Mexico, and to do it quickly before the American public turned against the war. So one of the reasons for Scott's campaign happening is that, again, Polk wants to only serve 1 term, but second, the American people are getting really sick of the war and they want it to end, so he is trying to end this as quickly as possible now. Trist had strong credentials. He spoke Spanish, was mentored by... Trist had strong credentials. He spoke Spanish, was mentored by and married the granddaughter of Thomas Jefferson. He was mentored by Thomas Jefferson and married his granddaughter. He was not mentored by the granddaughter of Thomas Jefferson. And it served as Andrew Jackson's private secretary. But Polk would soon discover that Trist had a mind of his own. One of his first acts was to offend General Scott with a note demanding the general not interfere with his diplomatic mission. It didn't help that Trist was a Democrat and Scott a Whig, or that Scott felt perfectly qualified to negotiate the treaty himself, so didn't want Trist there in the first place. So again, politics is kind of messing with the military operations. Scott, even though he's also a Whig, is there to make sure Taylor, another Whig, doesn't get too popular. But the president also doesn't trust Scott to negotiate the treaty, so he's sending this Democrat to negotiate the treaty, and now they're kind of fighting each other. But I'll give them credit, even if they didn't like each other at first, Trist and Scott put aside their differences because they're both about to realize something. I say it right here in the script. I'm reading. As the campaign dragged on, both men realized something. They weren't just close to defeating Mexico. There was a serious possibility they might destroy the country entirely. And if that happened, how could they make peace then? And that's going to be a theme explaining why the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo turned out as it did. So I'm going to answer some questions, and then we're going to go on to the next section. Men, I should revise my own American history notes. Sadly, after the whole Spanish conquest shabam, it was right into USA history. Yaris Acker, not going to lie, you're the first history YouTube channel I told my history-interested friend about. Thank you so much for doing so. I hope he was impressed. Furkalek, I have no idea how to pronounce that, apologies. I'll just say Furk. Furk asks, will I touch on the Apache involvement in the war, in the small war as it was or wasn't? Also, Robert Ely mentioned. So again, one of the few things I'm a little disappointed with myself is that I forgot to include Apache involvement in the series, and when I remembered to do that, we were way too late in development. And as I said, this is a multi-person production. I can't just easily change things. It's like steering a ship, right? You can turn the wheel really quickly, but the whole ship is not going to turn that fast. So that is unfortunate. I might be able to add a Polska fact in there somewhere. That's an easy way to make those sorts of revisions. Mexico was supposed to have a fleet. Very fun reference to our Boxer Rebellion video, and Italy. Are there lessons from the Peninsular War here on the guerrilla and anti-guerrilla side? I don't think there's a huge number of military lessons to be drawn from here, but I do think there's broader socio-political lessons to be drawn from this story, which is what the series really focuses on. Hi, I was wondering if I was going to discuss St. Patrick's Battalion and how you would treat the illegality of the war. That is a question from Santi Craft. I'm just going to say Santi. Sorry, I cannot pronounce that. So the St. Patrick's Battalion, yes, does get an honorable mention. They were a very interesting incident from the war. And how would I treat the illegality of the war? We discussed the causes of the war and its legal status in the previous part, and I get into detail there. And when you see the full series, you'll also see my thoughts. The Americans didn't do the mistake of Prussia, destroy the enemy completely. Matthew asks, any future videos set in Asia? Almost certainly, but there's no immediate plans for that. Freddie Ump asks, what was the world's reaction to the Mexican-American War? Most of the world didn't care that much. They were a little sick of North American affairs by this stage. America and Britain had their own unrelated conflict over Oregon, and the British used the Mexican-American War as leverage, but again, no one really cared that much. There was some interest in military circles just to see what the Americans could do. As mentioned before, Scott wanted to use the war to prove to the world that America could project power anywhere in the world, and he does successfully do that. But again, it's not a huge deal to these other countries. It's just just like, oh, America can land soldiers places. Cool, we should factor that into our calculations. Was any consideration of Mexican annexation? We will get into that very shortly with Trist and the like. Anything planned for African history, maybe pre or post-colonial? Very likely to come up in the future. No concrete plans. All right, let's get back to our narrative. What was the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo? That is the treaty that ends the Mexican-American War, which we will discuss in detail very shortly. So, C4, Mexico's stand. Santa Anna spent the desperate summer of 1847 rebuilding the Mexican army. The crisis unified the country like never before. Tens of thousands of soldiers and volunteers converged on the capital, answering church bells and sermons, declaring its defense a holy mission. Like so many Mexican armies, this new force lacked boots, transport, ammunition, weapons, even food. It was an eclectic mix: regulars, civicos, conscripts, and armed civilians. There was even an artillery battalion of Irish-American defectors. Santa Anna promised that the coming battle for Mexico City would redeem the nation's honor. Maybe, just maybe, God would deliver our Napoleon of the West a miracle. On August 7th, 1847, General Winfield Scott led around 11,000 American soldiers out of Puebla to Mexico City. 3 days later, they were confronted by Santa Anna and 30,000 angry Mexican troops. So I want to point out, Scott is at the end of his supply lines. I think he started with 15,000 men, or actually he might start with less in the force grew a little bit, but these guys are already kind of pushing the end of their supply lines, and Santa Anna pulls 30,000 soldiers together. And I know it sounds kind of insane to attack the enemy with 1/3 the numbers, but this is a really eclectic force. It's militia. A lot of these guys don't have guns. A lot of these guys don't have ammo. A lot of these guys aren't even trained. And this is a really, really professional American army, which is part of why the campaign was so unbelievably impressive. Santa Anna arrayed his army in several lines, creating a defense in depth that would bleed the Americans for every inch of ground. Every convent, hacienda, and solid structure was fortified and garrisoned. It was very likely the best plan Mexico had, and Mexican politics could not tolerate it. Santa Anna's rival, General Gabriel Valencia, disobeyed orders to protect the southern approaches and led 7,000 men to the lava fields near Padierna. Padierna? I'm pretty sure I looked it up before pronouncing in the actual series. So yeah, he leads 7,000 men to the lava fields near Padierna. Valencia believed he had found strong defensive ground guarded by seemingly impenetrable lava fields, but Santa Anna learned from experience that American engineers had a talent for penetrating nearly impassable terrain. Moreover, Valencia was exposed so far from the rest of the army. Valencia ignored all of Santa Anna's orders to return to position. I feel this incident, more than anything else, shows the severe dysfunction of Mexico. There is an American army literally outside their capital, and the army is still, I don't want to say infighting, but there's no I don't want to say no discipline. The army is just dysfunctional. Things aren't working, and they're defending their own capital. Meanwhile, the Americans are thousands of miles from home at the very end of their supply lines, and they're not having these issues. You attack that building, the men go attack the building. You order them to shoot a cannon, the men shoot the cannon. There's no problem here. On the night of August 19th, under cover of darkness and torrential rain, U.S. Army engineers carved a path across the lava field towards Valencia's flank. Santa Anna rushed with reinforcements, only to find his path blocked by American troops. Valencia could still retreat, but he refused to believe the Americans got through. Valencia's not thinking about the military situation. He's trying to prove that he's right, and now 7,000 men are moments away from being lost. At dawn, the Americans attacked. In under 90 minutes, Valencia's army was sent routing back to Mexico City, leaving behind 22 guns and 4 generals for Scott to capture. Santa Anna had to abandon all of his forward positions and fall back to a deeper line of defense along the Churubusco River. From then on, the battle was one bloody American assault on a fortified position after another. I will pronounce that again. From then on, the battle was one bloody American assault on a fortified position after another. And by the way, guys, keep asking questions. I will answer them as soon as we finish this part. The Mexicans fought stubbornly at every point. Their artillery fired so much that the oldest Spanish guns melted in their carriages. But Santa Anna knew that after losing Valencia's force, which is a third of his army, a little less, his army was hopelessly outmatched. By August 24th, Santa Anna agreed to an armistice and peace talks. The Americans suffered 1,400 casualties, and Mexico 5,000. And remember, the Americans are attacking here. When you inflict more casualties than you're taking on the offensive, that's a really incredible accomplishment. When Trist met Santa Anna in Mexico City, remember, Trist is the negotiator, not Scott, he found the Quaidillo impossibly intransigent. It became clear Santa Anna's real intention was to drag out talks while he prepared more defenses. Trist returned to American lines so the soldiers could get back to their bloody work. Scott's army, around 8,000 left. He started with 11,000, remember, I think. Yeah, 11,000. Now he's down to 7,000. Where are we? I lost the spot. Oh, sorry. He's down to 8,000. He started with 11,000. He's down to 8,000. Was still outnumbered by between 10 and 15,000 of Santa Anna's soldiers. The bloodiest assaults were carried out at the Molino del Rey, where the Americans falsely believed munitions were kept. What it was specifically, I think, is he was falsely informed by a local that there was like a cannon foundry there, but that was not actually true. And right next to it is the Mexican Military Academy at Chapultepec Castle. The fighting at Chapultepec became legendary on both sides. The castle's defenders, even down to the teenage cadets, fought to the death. According to legend, the last of the cadets threw himself from the rooftops draped in Mexico's flag rather than surrender. The U.S. Marines who assaulted the compound were so impressed that the Marine Corps hymn hails the site as the Halls of Montezuma to this day. All that was left to take was Mexico City itself. Actually, I have to address the Halls of Montezuma thing. So I don't know if you guys have heard the Marine Corps song. You almost certainly have, but I might not remember it. So here's a really cool image of the assault. And like, this is the U.S. Marine Corps. I don't know if you guys know any Marines. I don't know any very closely. Like, I talk to them sometimes. Awesome guys, really tough people. Do not want to be fighting against them, let me tell you. And like, the Marines, even at this time, super hardcore guys, they were so unbelievably impressed by the Mexican victory that like the Marine Corps hymn, which I guarantee you've heard. Let me pull it up. It's literally the first thing they sing about. The first thing they sing about is the bravery of the Mexican troops, which remember, like, when you fight an enemy, you don't want to say they're stupid. You don't want to say they're weak. You don't want to say they're dumb, because that's not impressive for you to beat them. You want to say the guy you beat was actually really big and strong, so you look better in comparison. So the first thing the Marine Corps sing from the from the halls of I can't sing. I'm sorry, guys. They go, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. We fight our country's battles in the air, on land, and sea. First to fight for right and freedom and to clean our honor. And to keep our honor clean. We are proud to claim the title of United States Marine. It's the first thing they sing about because they were so unbelievably impressed. And here is that famous painting of the last of the teenage cadets throwing himself off the rooftop. So as I understand, it was not actually a teenage cadet who threw himself off the rooftop. I think the guy was in his early 20s, but like, it's sort of iconic of like Mexico's situation right now, right? You see the villainous Americans around them, you see the blood, you see the suffering, there's a tear pouring from his eyes, you see the American on his horse. Actually, the American doesn't have a head, he has a US flag where his head is supposed to be, and the Mexican eagle flying in the background. And this is a really big nationalist rallying cry for the Mexican people. And like, you know, something I want to point out here is that like, as you know, he's like, I kind of drag on Mexico a little bit through this series. I keep pointing out just how dysfunctional they are. And whatever problems the Mexican state and people have or have had, you cannot say they were cowards. These guys were fighting against absolutely impossible odds with no equipment and absolutely incompetent leaders, and they just kept fighting to the death. And that is like just one of the most impressive things I've ever seen. There's something almost like ancient Greek or Homeric about accepting your lot, that you're going, you know, it's like the Iliad or the Odyssey. You have this completely hopeless lot, but you know what? You're just going to accept your fate and fight to the death anyway. There's something very heroic about that. Very admirable about that. So let me answer questions, and then we will discuss the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which I think is going to be a point of considerable interest with you guys. So let's have a look at the questions. Any future videos in South America? No concrete plans, but I'm not against it. Was this combat actually comparable to the combat of the Civil War? At the small scale, yes, but the Civil War was a much, much bigger conflict. Here, the armies were in the thousands, and like, even to have an army in the low tens of thousands would be considered big here. Whereas in the Civil War, 10,000 men is like one small unit, and there's just hundreds of thousands of men moving across the front. The scale is very, very different, but the technology isn't that different. Let's keep going. Sub-tier, any future history of Insert Nation videos coming? Well, here we have the history of the Mexican-American War, and after that, we're going to do a history of a lot of nations. You'll see. But you're asking specifically in the style of the Poland Ball history of Prussia? Not like that. Hi, I'm expecting some Easter egg from Napoleon's videos about the Emperor of Mexico put in there. We will see. What is the threat to non-subscribed viewers this time? By the way, my name is meant to say freedom. We will save that for the actual video. Javier Torres wants to know what you're learning about. It is the Mexican-American War. Historical Misconceptions World War II says, you teach history 110% better than most school teachers in the USA. That is a huge compliment. Thank you so much. I will say I'm a little sympathetic to the history teachers because, like, one, they have a very disinterested audience. So half the job is, like, trying to get the kids to listen, whereas you are all here of your own volition, right? So, like, I don't need to, like, snap my fingers like, hey, pay attention. I don't have to do that. Two, the curriculum is bad, and I have no doubt that if they could make the curriculum themselves, they would do a much better job. But, like, their job is not actually to teach history. Their job is to unquestionably teach the narrative determined by the state, which is, you know. Moving on. Philip Kebab, I know you made a 30 Years War video focused on Prussia and Austria, but you have any plans for the whole of the war? I understand if you don't want to go through it, it's a long war, or maybe the 100 Years War. I would love to do the 30 Years War. What I've been trying to figure out for a long time, honestly, is how to do it. Because, like, I feel like even one series of the 30 Years War is not enough. What I thought about doing is doing 3 or 4 biographies where I do the 30 Years War from the perspective of Wallenstein, and then the 30 Years War from the perspective of Gustavus Adolphus, and then the 30 Years War from the perspective of Cardinal Richelieu. That is one thought I had. Spizo says, hello, I've recently been banned for having mods in GT... What? I think you might be in the wrong stream, buddy. G-Money Better Pay. Are you going to talk about South American independence wars in the future? Not against it, but no concrete plans. Z Danek, could Mexico ever had a chance of preventing such a total loss? So my stance regarding the military situation is that Mexico was almost certainly going to lose the frontier, the territory under dispute. The fact that the Americans actually took their capital is, one, evidence of how unbelievably impressive the American armed forces were, and two, evidence of how just terribly, terribly dysfunctional the Mexican state was. And the causes of all these things are, of course, explored in the first 2 episodes of the series. Santa Craft says, sorry, sent it early. Oh, whoops. Here. Santa Craft asks, I was wondering if I was going to discuss Santa Anna's coup and to what extent you would cover the lead up, the government vanity and its effect on the war. Okay, so what Santa Craft is asking, I'm going to read that again just for the sake of the podcast. Santa Craft is asking if I cover Santa Anna's coups and the lead up to the conflict. This series was originally supposed to be the Mexican-American War, but it was impossible to cover the war without covering Texas, and then it was impossible to cover Texas without really covering Mexican history since its independence. So the 4 episodes of the series go episode 1, Mexican independence through Santa Anna's eyes. So like guys like Bustamante unfortunately get short thrift. Episode 2 ends up being sort of like Mexico's history up to the Mexican-American War, and also America's history after the War of 1812 to the Mexican-American War. And then episodes 2 and 3 are the actual conflict. So to answer your question, yes, this series is half about the differences between Mexico and America and why things went the way they did. And oh my God, there are 7, I'm sorry, I think it's wild. There are 70 people just showing up to a history lecture right now. Welcome everybody. I'm so glad you're joining us. If this is your first time in a stream, please say hi in the chat. We'll be so happy to have you involved. Ask questions. Like, we are all super passionate for history here. Like, get engaged. I promise we're all going to have a great time. What is the bird in the background? I think you're responding to the image of the cadet throwing himself from the rooftop. I think that's supposed to be the Mexican eagle. What is the favorite series of mine I've ever done? I'm super duper proud of the Napoleon III series. And while this isn't a series, I'm also really proud of the Russo-Japanese War. When am I going to talk about the American Civil War? Would like to, but no concrete plans yet. Have I ever met a real World War II veteran? That's a question from Historical Misconceptions. Yes, actually. When I was very young, the World War II veterans started dying off. So they were bringing all the World War II veterans into the schools to like discuss their time. And it was a very interesting experience. Santicraft says, sorry, sent it early. We agree that Chapultepec has been very propagandized and exaggerated. What do I think from my studies? I feel like it deserves to be propagandized. Not exaggerated. You shouldn't exaggerate anything. But like, again, going into the broader point, like whatever problems Mexico and Mexicans have, you cannot say they are cowards. Like they're very impressive in that respect. They're very, very tough people. And that is something that they should rightfully take pride in. What happened to the Mexicans in California after the Mexican-American War? There were barely any, but I'm pretty sure they were given citizenship. Like, there weren't more than a few thousand at the time. Yinglis, the Yinglet says impossible odds. On paper, it looked like as many expected for the USA to lose. Mexico not only outnumbered the Americans, but had significant combat veterans from their own civil war. So what the war was originally about was for the frontier, which Mexico barely controlled and could not project power into. From that perspective, the Americans were basically guaranteed to win. Pushing into Mexico proper, everyone thought the Americans would lose that part. And what's kind of crazy about the war is that the invasion from Veracruz to Mexico City, that worked too. And not only did it work, but it was like an unbroken string of victories against seemingly impossible odds. Will I make a video about the second invasion of Mexico in 1862, 1867? I don't think it's going to get a dedicated video, but we do mention it in the Napoleon III series. And that question is from Javier Torres. Zdenek is heading out. Thank you so much for joining the stream. It is always a pleasure to see you in the chat. How do I talk so fast? I actually need to chill out. You can't see it, but I literally have a note with big all cap text saying speak slower. And I guess it's not helping. Italian Risorgimento or the Balkans Wars, an idea. Okay, Hixley, I think you might be very happy of a coming series. Sorta Goodish 849. Sorry, 8491 says hello. Welcome to the stream. I'm super glad to have you. Wayward Templar says hi. First stream for me. Welcome to you as well. You better basically have a full lecture now. I think we do. Nice to meet you, Prophet of Old. Thank you, thank you. It was a long trip from the Holy Land, but I made it. Any major influence of Catholicism versus Protestantism in play? Not really. Like, this is the 1800s. People don't really fight wars for religion anymore. Religion plays like a secondary role. Like, some Americans feel like, yeah, let's go beat up those Catholics. And like, the priests in Mexico are actually a really big part of the war effort. They're the ones encouraging people to fight. Like, as I mentioned earlier, they were the ones telling all these guys to converge on the capital and defend the capital city. So they are an important factor, but they're not in the driver's seat. SantaCraft says, thank you. I'm really excited about a video on Mexico. I've studied so much history with my grandfather, and it's really fun to find someone who can teach history as excellently as you do. Thank you so much for the compliment, man. I hope our series lives up to your expectations. And guys are talking about how much they love the Peking series. Yes, also an excellent video of ours. I think it's actually, if it's not at 1 million views, it's really close. That is actually crazy. All right, I'm cutting off questions for this moment. However, please keep asking them. I will answer the questions, including any I have missed so far, after covering the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Please ask questions away. I think this is going to be the most interesting and exciting part. Whether it was for patriotism or personal glory, Santa Anna genuinely tried to save Mexico from its doomed situation. But the miracle he hoped for and promised never materialized. Mexico's politics, economy, and military were simply too dysfunctional, and Santa Anna himself, though displaying more genuine effort here than at any other time in his career, was not capable enough to overcome those challenges. Instead of Mexico's savior, Santa Anna became its scapegoat. At Querétaro, he was hounded by Oh wait, did I skip a part? Oh yeah, I did skip a part. Sorry, I gotta go back a little bit. All that was left was to take Mexico City itself. While Mexican soldiers desperately defended its gates, Santa Anna relocated the government and most of the army to Querétaro and set 30,000 prisoners loose on his way out. So that's Querétaro is north of Mexico City. Even after the Americans broke into the city, some of its inhabitants took pot shots at them, spurred on by local priests. So as I was pointing out before, like the priests aren't really in charge here, but like they are encouraging people to fight, even though the situation is like truly hopeless. By September 14th, 1847, Mexico's capital was in American hands. Though guerrilla resistance continued across the country, the war was effectively over. It was time to make peace. So then I say that point about Santa Anna again. Instead of Mexico's savior, Santa Anna became its scapegoat. At Querétaro, he was hounded by denunciations from politicians, and the army refused to follow any more orders. The Caudillo fled back into exile. Santa Anna's name, once a synonym with Mexican pride, with Mexican pride became a byword for arrogance and betrayal. So this is one of the main theses of this whole series. Santa Anna is often framed as an extremely bad, selfish, irresponsible, incompetent leader from Mexico. And there is a lot of truth to that. There really is. And Mexicans in particular, I've noticed, like to blame him for the course of the Mexican-American War. But in this one respect, I honestly feel like there is legitimate apologia to be done for Santa Anna. Many of Santa Anna's administrations were silly and irresponsible, and he did not govern Mexico well. But Santa Anna always had this vision for himself, the Napoleon of the West, the savior of the Mexican people who was going to win Mexico the glory and prestige it deserves. And while he was always like a little too selfish and irresponsible to achieve it, here, at the Mexican-American War, he actually gets his act together. He actually starts behaving responsibility, and he is dragging this war effort together with spit and duct tape. And you know what? Even though he failed, I think that was the closest. Listen, even if you don't want to say he was a hero for this is as close to a hero as Santa Anna ever got. And I think it is so unfair to blame him when he was probably, for maybe the first time in his career, the most responsible and competent man in Mexico. He very nearly won this war. But one, he wasn't good enough, and two, Mexico itself was just so dysfunctional. So a big part of the series really is doing some apologia for Santa Anna. And as we've seen before, his past presidencies for Mexico, kind of disastrous. He has another presidency after this, actually, also kind of disastrous. But this one time during the war, I think he was genuinely trying to do right by his nation and his people. And even if you side with the Americans, I think you can acknowledge that there was a tragic aspect to the fact that he failed. I'm reading now. Power over the new provisional government did not fall to a caudillo, but moderate federalist civilians, most prominently the Chief Justice of Mexico's Supreme Court. Now it was no longer Mexico who proved the greatest obstacle to peace, but America's own president. From the simplifying distance of Washington, Polk decided that the occupation of Mexico's capital meant America should demand more territory. Trist was now instructed to demand the Baja California and transit rights across the Tehuantepec Isthmus. So I discussed this earlier, and there is a map that goes around about what President Polk supposedly wanted, and it is not true. I'm digging this up on my other monitor. I believe it was from Reddit. Well, the map goes around a lot, but I usually see it on Reddit. Here. So this is a map of, supposedly, this is not true, supposedly what President Polk wanted from the war. So everything we got historically, and the Baja California, and also basically the northern half of Mexico, all the way to Tampico, and also the Yucatan Peninsula, and the Cuba thing is unrelated. This map just is not true. I do not know where it comes from. The only additional land Polk asks for, and this is what he started the war demanding, this is like, they took the capitals who wanted a little more. What he wanted was also the Baja California, this is true, and he also wanted transit rights, not actual territory, but the right to cross the central isthmus of Mexico. The Yucatan, this huge chunk of northern Mexico, I have no idea where it comes from. The only theory I have is I think there was a proposal by Samuel Houston for something similar. I believe the, what was it called? It was the something mission. The Slidell mission. I believe there's a map of it there. Maybe the map is in the Texas Revolution? One of the things that kills you about Wikipedia is like, you find this amazing map on some random article and then you just totally lose it. I gotta dig this up. Sam Houston, maybe? Let me try one more. Here, okay, I found it. So there are several lines here, and this map is in Spanish, a language I am barely literate in. I can barely speak. Proposition of Samuel Houston. This line is very close to the Samuel Houston line, and I think they are conflating these two things. Again, this is like from Tampico, which is like not quite halfway down Mexico, maybe like 1/3 of modern day Mexico, and it just goes straight west, and that includes a huge, huge chunk of Mexico. But like, this map isn't true. He just asked for the Baja California and transit rights on top of the modern American Southwest. So anyway, so from Washington, Polk is like, oh, we got their capital. Let's take more land, right? And there were some within the Democratic Party calling for even more, excuse me, let me try that again. There were some within the Democratic Party calling for even more extreme demands, up to the complete annexation of Mexico, though that was not a popular position. Few in the United States actually wanted to share a country with large numbers of Catholic Hispanics. Many Americans conceived of them as basically Indians, who the United States was actively trying to remove from the country. Trist and Scott, who were actually in Mexico, saw things very differently. Every day, central authority came closer to collapse. If they dragged out negotiations and pressed for more demands, Mexico's government would surely collapse. Then there would be no one to make peace with, and America's southern frontier would be guaranteed chaos for decades to come. So this is very remarkable. Trist, a Whig, and Trist, a Democrat, and Scott, a Whig, who, like, they were kind of fighting when Trist first arrived. They were like, man, our Democrat president is kind of crazy. Even to demand the Baja California is like going to destroy Mexico. And you need to understand that, like, even when you've completely annihilated another country, you need its government's help to make the peace deal. And it's not like they could take over all of Mexico and later decide this isn't working and rebuild the Mexican government. If the Mexican government's gone, it's gone. You're not, you're not gonna put that genie back in the bottle. So with Scott's support, Trist ignored the president's orders. When Polk recalled him on October 6th, Trist ignored that too. So Trist, the diplomat Polk sent expecting him to be more loyal, is now just disobeying all of his orders. It would have taken months to send a new negotiator, and Mexico might not survive the wait. Moreover, while Trist probably didn't realize it, the American public wanted to end the war. On February 2nd, 1848, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed. Mexico would recognize the Rio Grande as its border with the United States. New Mexico and California, nearly half of Mexico's territory, would be ceded to the United States. And the United States would pay $15 million for the land and assume $3.25 million in Mexican debts owed to American citizens. Barely half of the over $30 million Mexico had been offered before the war. It was exactly what the war was originally fought for, and none of what President Polk later demanded. When Trist returned to Washington, a furious Polk immediately dismissed him. Trist's career was ruined, and Polk wouldn't even reimburse the expenses he had incurred since ignoring the recall order. Nonetheless, the American public celebrated the victorious peace Trist had ushered in. By the way, not only is Trist's career ruined, like, I don't know if he's fully bankrupt, but he's also kind of financially ruined by this, because, like, it's kind of expensive to, like, negotiate a peace treaty in another country, and Polk made him cover his own expenses. And I think Trist ends up being, like, this mid-level functionary for some railroad for the rest of his career. He got completely thrown under the bus here. So before going on to our last two sections, I want to review the comments. Also, I'm taking my jacket off because it is way too hot in this room, and also I can take the headset off. There's no actual audio I need to be listening to right now. Oh, and since I am taking this off, I want to show you guys the merch shirt. If you guys have seen previous streams, you've seen this a million times already, but this is the shirt you will be able to buy when our series comes out very, very soon. It is Santa Anna, the Napoleon of the West. And again, you will be able to buy that on callmeezekiel.store shortly when the series comes out. And the whole series is coming out, like, if it's not even a month away, it's probably weeks away at this rate. We are just finalizing the last few things. Episode 1 is basically done. Episode 2 is basically done. 3 is being finished up, as is episode 4. And we are going to release them weekly when they are all ready to go. So let me take a look at questions now. So the last question that I missed was from Grove Maestra. What do I think of all the independence movements in other regions of Mexico that sprung up around the same time as Texas and California? Did any of them have a chance to make it on their own? So most of those were not independence movements. Most of those were temporarily making themselves independent, and they were going to rejoin Mexico when Mexico re-implemented an earlier constitution. They were not trying to become independent countries. They were trying to force the central government to restore a certain degree of autonomy to themselves. And oh my God, there are 72 people watching this stream. Oh my God. Thank you guys for showing up. And if this is your first stream, please say hi. We'll be super happy to welcome you. Me always thinking that's where Keel comes from because of Ezekiel. Ezekiel. I see. Some people call me Easy, actually. What sites do I use to get my info and research? So I will often start on Wikipedia just as like a starting point, but for actual literature, I insist on using books written by like properly educated historians. I believe the works I used for this one it was something like Blood March, and the other was just the Mexican-American War. Here, when the actual series comes out, I'll be sure to put all of the sources in the actual description. Very little Wikipedia information gets into these videos. Sometimes Wikipedia has something I can't find anywhere else, and if that's the case, I'll try to back it up with some other source somewhere else. But frankly, like, Wikipedia is a bit incestuous with its sourcing. Sometimes I will see a claim on Wikipedia, and then I will see the exact same wording somewhere else, and I'll realize that either the Wikipedia article copied some other guy's article, or the other guy's article copied Wikipedia. So, like, sometimes you gotta just use your judgment with this stuff. But for the most part, I only use literature written by proper historians. Do I think this might be my favorite series yet? I mean, we won't know until it's done, but it's coming together beautifully. Why do fleeing governments release prisoners? Because they're hoping the prisoners are like violent and make the occupation more difficult and maybe kill occupying soldiers. Have I ever heard of the St. Patrick Battalion? Yes, we do mention that in the previous section, I believe. Could it be the Golden Circle plan map included for some reason? This is referring to Polk's. It's possible, but I think the Golden Circle wanted to go way further south. And Polk was obviously not part of the Golden Circle. I think he died very shortly after his term ended. Weren't there plans to build a canal across the Tehuantepec Peninsula? There is no way they wanted to build a canal across this thing. This is huge. And like, it's mountainous and jungle. I mean, it's not like Panama isn't full of jungle, but like, there's no way they were going to try to build a canal here. No damn way. Although who knows, like in the early 19th century, mid 19th century, there were some pretty wacky ideas. As a Texan, I always found it strangely hilarious how many chances Santa Anna got despite failing so much. Really is a story of persistence in a way. Am I going to discuss Juarez? If I'm not mistaken, that's after this story, and we end roughly with the end of the Mexican-American War. We talk like a little bit about the following events, but the Mexican-American War is where we cut this off. Stuart Johnson's pointing out that I can bookmark Wikimedia pages. Yeah, I should probably start doing that. Aviation Speaker Man Alt says he just joined the stream, but it is absolute cinema. Thank you so much for saying so. I'm glad you're enjoying. Yinglis the Yinglet says, yes, back when ambassadors had far more power to basically ignore Congress and president, like what happened in Oregon, I think we should have completely annexed Mexico. Again, like basically no one wanted that. And like, let's be realistic about what annexing Mexico means, right? Like America is already having severe problems with Mexican guerrillas harassing their supply lines. If America actually did that, they'd probably have a civil war basically instantly. And on top of that, you'd probably also see like a mass migration of peoples from Mexico into the United States proper, which again, like not getting into contemporary politics, but like even today when America has more of an ability to digest these people, it's very controversial. Whereas back then, people are like way more concerned about like racial purity and cultural purity, and there's no public education system to force these people to learn English, and like it was not realistic it would happen, and frankly America would probably have an instant civil war if it tried. Am I the only one that thinks is you're posting that again? Okay. Aviation Speaker Man Alt. So this is a question that was asked before, but I will answer it again. He wants to know if Mexico had a chance at winning the war. So the actual frontier for which it was being fought, Mexico had no chance to defend that. As regards to stopping the American invasions of their more core territory, they could have realistically won those, and it's a testament to one, the skill of America's military, and two, the dysfunction of Mexico, that they lost basically every battle. Not literally all of them, but like a lot of them. If Jose de Urrea kept on moving north to Texas, maybe Mexico might have a chance. You guys are talking about, I think that's the Texas Revolution. Am I drinking vodka? No, I am drinking Trader Joe's oolong tea. Oh, Guio Auditor. I actually think we have that exact quote about swallowing Mexico in the previous part. What's my favorite series so far behind this one? Definitely Napoleon III. I'm also very proud of the Russo-Japanese War. What stopped Mexican revanchism or further American invasion post-war? Well, further American invasion was because they didn't want any more of Mexico. Like, this frontier is very sparsely settled, whereas, like, as soon as you get south of the border, you start getting much more thickly settled territory. America also takes this land in what's called the Gadsden Purchase, but that's also barely inhabited land. And what stopped Mexican revanchism is that the country, like, they have a civil war, and then they get invaded by France, and then they have a civil war again, and, like, Mexico just has such severe internal problems. And yes, Javier Torres, we do mention the St. Patrick Battalion. Oh my God. Yeah, you're right. It's just my face this whole time. Sorry, guys. This is the map. Up here is the sparsely populated frontier, which Mexico had no chance of controlling. And then the rest of Mexico, they could have realistically defended. Yeah, guys, please remind me if I'm forgetting to do basic things like show you what I'm talking about, because you have like 30 things to manage as a stream and I have no producer clicking these buttons. It's all just me. All right. C7, National Tragedy. Mexico, and this is the other main thesis of the series, Mexico did not have to fight a war with America. The United Kingdom proved as much with Oregon. If you recall, there's a territorial dispute between the United States and Britain over the Oregon territory, and like there's a very brief moment where they're kind of like thinking like, oh, maybe we should fight a war over this territory, and then both America and Britain are like, no, that's really stupid. We're not fighting a war over Oregon. Let's just settle this. Compromising with the United States brought prosperity to both nations. Mexico's decision to fight killed tens of thousands of its sons and left it more humiliated than ever. The over $30 million settlement Mexico could have won was reduced to barely half that. But Mexico gained something else from the conflict. The sacrifice and heroism of so many young Mexicans breathed life into a national identity struggling to establish itself. Independence from Spain only helped the elites, but this new identity of a heroic stand against one of the world's greatest powers appealed to everyone. From this defeat was born the conviction that Mexico, though beaten, could never again be broken. As for Santa Anna, his new exile in Jamaica wouldn't last forever. So we do the "this looks like a job for the Napoleon of the West" skit one more time, but the joke is that he's old and like doesn't have the will to do it, so he's like, this looks like a job for the Napoleon of the... we already know where this is going. So Santa Anna is in Cuban exile, and then things get kind of bad in Mexico, so they invite him back one more time. And this term, like, he's pretty irresponsible across all of his terms, but this time in particular, like, he's barely even trying, and he even ends up selling more land to the United States in the Gadsden Purchase. That is this land right here, which is, I think it's between modern day New Mexico and Arizona, if I have it correct. And then they kick him out one last time. And then the rest of Santa Anna's life is very uneventful. He kind of like wanders around in exile for a while. He spends some time in the United States, some time in the Caribbean, and then he returns to Mexico in 1874. Here, I'll read how we conclude his story. Santa Anna would finally be permitted to return to Mexico in 1874, old, blind, and penniless. But the Mexican Republic had moved on. Santa Anna spent his last years in quiet, obscure poverty, dying in 1876 without fanfare. Santa Anna's life had spanned from Mexico's history from Spanish colony to independence, to empire, republic, war, glory, exile, and finally, ruin. And then we have our other main thesis, which is sort of like the difference in how a dysfunctional country like Mexico handles the modern day American Southwest versus how a very, very ultra functional society like America's handles the American Southwest. Over in the United States, the decades following the Mexican-American War saw the transformation of the new American Southwest. The region always had immense potential for settlement, ranching, mining, and commercial agriculture. What it needed was stability, security, and deep capital markets. Things it never had under Mexico City, it finally gained under Washington. In a fit of tremendous irony, many of the region's settlers would come from Mexico itself. Success was only spurred on by the discoveries of gold and silver. So again, the problem isn't necessarily the Mexican people themselves, is that their government is so dysfunctional that they can't use the land. And what does that mean? It means that if you're a Mexican citizen going to like Mexican California, you are going to be constantly threatened by Native American raiders who are going to kill you. And if you want to get an investment to found a mine, no one's going to give you that money. Or even if they did, like there's a good chance you might just steal that money because you know they can't do anything about it. Whereas America, a much bigger, much more powerful, much less corrupt country, they just sent the army in and the West was pacified very, very quickly. And there were all these investors enthusiastic for developing industry and railroads and all these things you need to have a successful region. And because it was under American governance, a lot of people from Mexico crossed the border to the American side to use this land they weren't able to use before. And something you'll sometimes hear from Mexicans is like, oh, the California gold rush started literally 1 year after the Mexican-American War. Wouldn't it have been so much better if we just held on to it for another year and got that gold? And the answer is no, because frankly, if that was still part of Mexico, there probably wouldn't have been a gold rush. The reason the gold rush happened is that one, now it's under American governance, the land is safe enough to look for precious metals. And two, even the Mexicans had found the precious metals, they wouldn't have been able to dig them up because they are not able to get the people over there and protect them when they arrive and supply them and do all the trade you need. The problems are more fundamental than just natural resources, right? There's plenty of countries with many natural resources that are utterly impoverished. And there's plenty of countries with no natural resources or very few natural resources that are some of the richest and most successful in the world. Geographical determinism is a useful tool, but like it's very often just wrong. Like who in a million years would have told you that Singapore would be one of the greatest cities in the world? It was a swamp 50 years ago. Regardless, let's move on with our narrative. Polk's presidency was perhaps the single most successful in American history. He accomplished every one of his spectacular promises in the one and only term he dutifully served. In many ways, this tremendous success ruined the Democrats' chances of victory in the 1848 election. Sorry, I lost it. Give me a sec. Okay, I'm back to reading. Actually, okay, I see this one comment now, but I really got to go off of it. Anti-Boy Scout says, most people who win the lottery end up bankrupt. Like, yes, that is completely true. There are so many people who, like, are really bitter and resentful about their lots in life. And, like, you can look at them and realize instantly this is completely their fault. And you see it with lottery winners, right? Like, lottery winners are generally very poor people. And then they win the lottery and they think they're not poor anymore. And they're just bankrupt again. And the reason they're financially not well off, listen, some people are screwed by their life circumstances, obviously. But the reason a lot of these people are not well off is not because they are unlucky, is because they are terrible with money. And like the same is true with nations sometimes. Like Mexico, like the American Southwest, like California is one of the richest places on earth right now, right? Like it's not that Mexico did not have California turn into the richest place on earth, is that the Americans were capable of turning it into the richest place on earth and the Mexicans couldn't. And again, like the reasons why we explore a lot in the first 2 episodes of the series. But yeah, Anti-Boy Scout, I really like that relationship to lottery winners going bankrupt. That's a very good point. Meanwhile, the Democrats, yes. So just as Polk feared, the Whigs totally reversed their war skepticism and nominated Zachary Taylor for president. He took as few policy positions as possible, instead emphasizing his successful military record. So if you recall, the whole reason Scott was sent to do the naval invasion of Mexico and finally win the war is that Zachary Taylor was becoming too famous and popular, and he didn't want him to get any more famous and popular, and that just didn't work. And the Whigs were also broadly the more anti-war party. Like there were plenty of pro-war Whigs, but they were generally the more anti-war party, and the Whigs nominate Zachary Taylor, and they go from the we don't like the war party to the we won the war party. Look, Zachary Taylor, isn't he a cool dude? Meanwhile, the Democrats tore themselves apart over whether and how to add new slave states to the Union. So something I need to emphasize. The Democrats are not necessarily the slavery party, and the Whigs are not necessarily the anti-slavery party. There are a lot of pro-slavery Whigs from the South, and there's a lot of anti-slavery Democrats from the North. It's not a party issue yet. It only becomes a party issue later. And actually, the events we discuss in this series are kind of what makes it into a party issue. Meanwhile, the Democrats tore themselves apart over whether and how to add slave states to the Union. Their candidate, Lewis Cass, ran on a platform of popular sovereignty, in which each state would choose for itself whether to be free or slave. If you recall, the Missouri Compromise, which set up the Missouri Compromise line, north of which no state was allowed to be a slave state. Let me pull this up. it was broken apart, because one of the reasons the Missouri Compromise worked is that the anti-slavery people were very in favor of it, because way more of the United States was north of the line, and therefore the United States of America would just naturally become a more anti-slavery country as more states were added to the Union. But now that the whole Southwest is added, it seems like this could be ripe territory for slavery. And it turns out that's not actually the case. The American Southwest was not good places for plantations, and so like even if these were slave states, they probably would not have that many slaves, and it wouldn't help the pro-slavery cause that much. But like they didn't realize it at the time, right? Like they're working with the best information they have. And there's a lot of Democrats who are feeling, sorry, not Democrats, again, it's not a party issue yet. There's a lot of pro-slavery people, or at least like moderates on the slavery issue, who want to get rid of it but want to manage the decline, who are very concerned about the need to add more slave states to the Union as they perceive it. So they run on popular sovereignty, which would allow any of the new states to join as slave states, hypothetically. And here's the other thing that happened. So if you recall, in previous episodes, Martin Van Buren was really aggressively snubbed by Andrew Jackson. And Martin Van Buren is actually iconic of anti-slavery Democrats. Martin Van Buren was an anti-slavery guy. I don't know if he was at the time. I think he became more anti-slavery later. So meanwhile, Martin Van Buren had not forgotten how the Democrats accused him of betraying Jackson. Excuse me. Here, let me get another drink in me. My throat's killing me. Excuse me. Meanwhile, Martin Van Buren had not forgotten how the Democrats accused him of betraying Jackson's legacy and snubbed his attempt to run for president in 1844. Remember, they nominated Polk instead of Van Buren. In 1848, he vengefully ran for the anti-slavery Free Soil Party, stealing key anti-slavery Democrat votes. I really got to emphasize this point. There were a lot of anti-slavery people in the Democrat Party, and this is actually what this isn't the whole thing, but this is a big part of what makes the Democrats sort of iconically the slave party, where Van Buren is pissed and he wants to sabotage their run. This anti-slavery run, ironically enough, served to deliver the presidency to the slave-owning Whig Zachary Taylor. Zachary Taylor's a Whig, but he owned slaves. I don't know if he was pro-slavery. I'm pretty sure he was a moderate on slavery. Taylor was known for like not taking too many political positions. Just like ancient Rome, I'm reading, American politics continued to be dominated by victorious generals who won new lands for its empire. But Whig luck had hardly improved since William Henry Harrison. Taylor also died early in his presidency, this time making it a whole year before kicking the bucket. Luckily for the Whigs, Taylor's vice president and replacement was Millard Fillmore, a proper Whig who governed more or less as the party hoped. So this is going to that like comment from way earlier, where like someone pointed out that every president who the Whigs got elected into office died, which is true, and their vice presidents ended up having to serve out the term. So the first time this happened, it was William Henry Harrison. Sorry, I want to make sure I'm not misinforming you guys. Yeah, it was William Henry Harrison who was the vice president. William Henry Harrison was the original candidate. He makes John Tyler the president, but John Tyler isn't really a Whig, and he gets expelled from the Whig Party for not being Whiggish enough. And then they're really upset about this. So they don't make that mistake again, and they make sure the vice president for their new president, all the wires in my brain are crossed. The Whigs do not make the same mistake they made with John Tyler. They make sure an actual proper Orthodox Whig is the vice president. So when Zachary Taylor dies, a proper Whig is the president, and that ends up being Millard Fillmore. He governs exactly as the party wants. And Fillmore, like, I don't hear him talked about that much, but he's an insanely influential president of the United States. Though the Wilmot Proviso was defeated long before the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, that was an attempt by anti-slavery people to make it illegal to add any new slave states to the Union via the new acquisitions in the Southwest. It was clear the Missouri Compromise was over. The situation was not helped by Polk's attempt to buy Cuba from Spain in his last year, which would have certainly been another slave state. So yeah, that's a cool little detail. Polk did try buying Cuba. So on that map, that makes me really irrationally angry. It is true. He did want Cuba. Under Fillmore, the Compromise of 1850 was implemented. Among its many features was popular sovereignty. So remember, that was the Democrat position supposedly, and they lose, but the Whigs actually end up implementing the Democrat proposal for the popular sovereignty, which would soon lead to the horrors of Bleeding Kansas. Though the Union certainly lasted longer with the Compromise, it was now on its path to civil war. Just as Emerson predicted, America had defeated Mexico and had become poisoned in turn. And that is our series on the Mexican-American War. Thank you guys so much for joining. Now, we're not over yet. I'm going to answer a few more questions. And also, I have one last treat for you guys. I want to go over the Character Design Bible real quick with you guys, because this is something we produce for each series, and I think it's really fun to share them with you. But before we get into that, let's take a look at the comments. Yo boy TGP official says hi, welcome to the stream. I hope you're still here so you can hear me welcome you back. By the way, what am I animating with? Okay, so the illustrations are done in a variety of programs, mostly Adobe Photoshop, and then they are animated using the markers system, the keyframe system in Adobe Premiere. Javier Torres, not going to lie, I kind of cried after the St. Patrick Brave defense. I'm glad you're getting so emotional about this. History is a really cool thing. It's very awesome when you can get really involved with it. French Empire Wine says, do not fear, Napoleon III is here. Phillips Kebab says, oh, just Philip. Yo, easy. You very begin a project and get super into it, and then it's just I don't know on that one. I'm not sure what point you're trying to make. Sorry. Anti-Boy Scout, that was the point about the lottery. Yitz2 asks, what's the difference in how willing America is to enforce the law between now and after the Civil War? Famously, the U.S. Army is completely unwilling to defend black voters from the Democrats. So the Reconstruction era is very, very complicated, where I don't want to get too into this, but there was a period where the North or the occupying forces were way, way, way too zealous in enforcing the law, and then they got not nearly zealous enough. I think that also just because of the nature of contemporary American politics, the period is heavily, heavily politicized. Tactical Titans Real says, hi, welcome to the stream. I'm glad you could make it. Aki-san 1940 asks, do I think that if Mexico had sold Texas to the USA, they would have been given a Mexican-American war anyway? Yes, because America was not just after Texas, they were after the whole Southwest. And also, Mexico kind of gave up on most of Texas. They were fighting for a big chunk of it. Guillo Auditor says, Polk on Taylor becoming the Whig president be one often meets his destiny on the road he took to avoid it. Yeah, definitely. Javier Torres said, I heard there was some black slaves who escaped to Mexico for a better life since slavery was banned in Mexico since 1829. There were a few runaways. I don't think there was a huge number of them, though. Grovemeister asks, do I know anything about Henry Clay's opinion was about the war, or was he not in politics at the time? I'm pretty sure he was against it, but don't quote me on that. Anti-Boy Scout says only California can grow cotton and other cash crops. Yeah, but they end up being a free state when they join the Union. Or actually, I think they end up half and half. I think they're officially a free state, but they promised to send a pro-slavery senator to maintain the balance. Philip says, great stream. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, as does Guillo Auditor. Hello there. Welcome to the stream. You might be late to the party, but you are surely the life of it. Javier Torres, Holy Peak Mexico Balls. Carson McCorkle says, you mentioned the effectiveness of American artillery versus relatively weak Mexican artillery. Since the war takes place before synthetic gunpowder, was lack of good powder affecting Mexico, old guns, other? Honestly, a little bit of everything. One of the main issues with Mexican artillery is they could make their own gunpowder, while I believe the Americans imported it, but I think it was the sulfur in Mexico was of really low quality, or their mixture was bad. There was something wrong with the Mexican gunpowder that gave their cannons a really, really short range. On top of that, Americans had something called flying artillery, where both the guns and the men manning the guns were mounted on horses. So even though they're artillery, they can actually move almost as fast as the cavalry, and that's a really big deal. Does America still enforce manifest destiny on other areas of land? America these days, I think there's still colonialism laws in Alaska, but that is all definitely sovereign U.S. territory. Although there are some pushes by Americans today to take over Greenland. Philly says, you start a project and then it goes IDK. Again, I'm very sorry, Philly. I'm still not quite sure what you're asking. Yeah, and Javier Torres, we're about to get into the flags. Hey, Ezekiel, should you buy and paint Dark Angels or Night Lords? I like Dark Angels better, but Night Lords have a way better paint scheme. The Kingdom of Italy. In what world would Mexico win the Mexican-American War? Is there anything they could have done? They were sure to lose the frontier. There was no way they were holding it. Tom Yoda, can we send unsubscribed viewers into exile with Santa Anna? I think they deserve far worse. Exile is too kind of punishment for them. Useless Man says, kind of outside the scope of the Mexican-American War, but going back to Millard Fillmore, do you think that the Civil War could have been either delayed or even prevented with a different compromise? I don't know about the compromise of 1850 to begin with, but I do not think the American Civil War was inevitable. I think that both abolitionists and the people who would end up leading the Confederacy to succeed were behaving in extremely irresponsible ways that unnecessarily got hundreds of thousands of Americans killed. Nikki's Whimsical Tour of the World says, I had this argument recently. Do I think the Nueces Strip was de jure Mexican land, or do you think the U.S. claim had some merit? So de jure, I think, barely applies to that region of the world because dealing with frontiers that are questionably controlled. De facto, it was Mexican until they had much better control over it until the Americans bought the land, and then it was de facto American. What do I mean by America got poison in turn at the end? Oh, sorry, that is a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson, who I think I begin part 3 with. As American intellectual Ralph Waldo Emerson put it, the United States will conquer Mexico, but it will be as the man swallows the arsenic which brings him down in turn. Mexico will poison us. Where can I draw country balls like that? We have an extremely, extremely talented team of artists working for us. Like, a lot of them are like classically educated through art schools and stuff. So I know the art style itself is simple, but like we have unbelievable talents working for us. All right, so let's actually talk about the character design Bible. So the first most significant feature is we don't use what was strictly the Mexican national flag at the time. We use a couple of different Mexican national flags to indicate like different political alignments and time periods in Mexico. So originally we were going to use the Burgundy Cross to represent the Viceroyalty, but the whole team and I actually forgot to do that. So from the start, we mostly represent Mexicans as Federalists because they fight for a more Federalist vision of the country. Sorry, we represent them as monarchists because they were originally fighting for a monarchist vision of the country. Then they are broadly depicted as Federalists when they are a federal republic. And then when they become the Centralist Republic, they are all Centralist balls unless they specifically are a Federalist. And Santa Anna was actually a member of every one of these factions. He is a Federalist, he is a Centralist, and while we don't have it here, he starts his career as a monarchist, and that's how we depict him. We give him his iconic sideburns from a very particular painting. Let's see here. There he is. So there's a really great, I think this is a, daguerreotype of him, but there's a portrait of him as a young man where he has those like really iconic 19th century cavalry whiskers. It's not this one. It's him as a young man, I believe. And the truth is, like, he's kind of generic looking, and we try not to put hair on our country balls. So we use the picture of him as a young man specifically give him like some iconic feature. Why can't I find this painting? Do they not have it? All right, well, I'll find it in time for the podcast and I'll put it up on screen. But yeah, Santa Anna's design is going to be a Mexico ball to whatever faction he happens to be aligned with at the time. He has pauldrons, he has sideburns, he wears a military bicorn, which we took out of one of his paintings. And of course, he is going to wear a sash marking that he is the president while he is the president. And also, he gets his leg blown off during the pastry war. So after that happens, his entire, his left leg, so the viewer bottom right side, is going to be replaced with pure cork. And that's a really fun detail that we're going to include through the series. Other character designs, Augustin de Iturbide is a very important dude, and we dress him as a general before he's the emperor, and we give him a little imperial crown after. I believe this is the actual crown he wore, if I'm not mistaken. Anastasio Bustamante is an important conservative leader who crops up several times throughout the series. Mariano Paredes crops up once, so we gave him a quick design. And Ferdinand this is the seventh, is the king of Spain when they declare independence, so he also shows up a few times. And then we have a lot of American designs. Sam Houston wears a tricorn hat and a red scarf. John Fremont is sort of like an explorer outfitted U.S. soldier with a military cap and a belt and a telescope. Zachary Taylor and Winfield Scott are U.S. generals. Taylor is themed silver and Scott is themed, I believe there's either gold or bronze. I think it was supposed to be gold. Martin Van Buren has his iconic kind of messed up hair and he has a politician look. Andrew Jackson. I am so proud of the design for Andrew Jackson. He looks like a vampire. He just has this awesome coat, and he was famous for giving out these walking sticks made out of hickory wood because he was old hickory. And by the way, we have a sticker with Andrew Jackson looking like a vampire with his hickory stick. So, we also have Santa Anna's leg. Again, the merch is not available for sale yet, but it will be available for sale when the series comes out. And Nicholas Trist and John Tyler both look like civilians in top hats, and Trist is themed green and Tyler is themed black. And then finally, we have James Polk before and after the president, and William Henry Harrison, who I believe this is the same or similar design he had when he shows up in the War of 1812 series. So yeah, that is our character design Bible. And I believe that's everything I want to share with you guys. So we will do one last round of questions and then we will call this a stream. There are still 50 people listening to this. You guys are crazy. I'm so glad you were all here to join us. Yeah, we peaked at 74 people. Wild. Let's take a look at the questions. The Kingdom of Italy asks if the South had secured its independence, do I think they would have fought for the Allies or Axis or Central Powers? I mean, you can only give a speculative answer, right? Like, who knows what happens if the Union gets torn apart? Chances are, my guess is they'd just be neutral. Like, why would they care? Hey, Ezekiel, does Santa Ana have Dota 2 or League of Legends vibes? League of Legends. More women play that game, and that's what he'd be there for. I used to draw Poland ball in high school because I can't draw. Bought a drawing tablet off my sister. I'm thinking of getting back into it. Yeah, try it out. It's a very fun art style. True or Do says he likes the design for the Mexican monarchist. Hello from Kazakhstan. Man, from Kazakhstan. Isn't it like the middle of the night for you, dude? Well, I'm glad you can make it to the stream. Javier Torres, what's the difference between a federal country ball and a centralist country ball? So that just represents the political factions within Mexico. The federalists are kind of the liberals and the centralists are definitely the conservatives. And we use them to indicate either when Mexico is a federalist or centralist republic. And also if you happen to be of a specific political faction, that is also your country ball. Tom Yoda says, we all know about the unsubscribed viewers, but what about the unsubscribed non-viewers? It's like an unknown unknown. It just doesn't exist to you. Don't think about it. Andrew Jackson's looking like a vampire. I know, it's the best. Grovemeister likes the art in our new videos, but thinks there's something so awesome about the old stuff on the Russo-Japanese War. The music and humor in it was on point, and I miss it quite a bit. No, it was a great video. We're really proud of it. Will the failed assassination attempt of Andrew Jackson be shown? No, it's not really too much about his presidency or administration. Kingdom of Italy, I already answered that. Historical Misconceptions World War II asks, Andrew Jackson casually taking out his would-be assassin is my favorite Andrew Jackson moment. Yeah, no, he was a tough dude. Yaris Acker says, this was an awesome stream. This is my first stream to ever join on YouTube and my first stream to join on time and my CME first stream. I love this so much. Yeah, I'm so glad you enjoyed it. Thank you for joining. The plan is to have these be regularly on Tuesdays in the afternoon. I don't know the exact time they're going to be started, but like because we have a series about to come out, they're going to be a little unstable. But once we're done releasing the Mexican-American War series, the goal, I can't promise this is going to happen, but the goal is every Tuesday between like 1:30 and 3:30 p.m. EST. We'll figure out the exact start time in the future. Yaris Acker is from Egypt. I guess that explains why you were asking for all that Middle Eastern history. Dinkle Winkle asks, do I have any thoughts on Caribbean history? Not really. I don't know a huge amount about it, to be honest. Oh, I lost the stream. That means I also lost the questions. No. Okay, no, the stream is still working. Okay, I just had a little refresh issue. Do I think it was safer in Texas or California under Spain or Mexico? Honestly, probably Spain. Javier Torres asks, should we talk about the Reform War? Not on the plan. Good evening from Germany. Welcome, welcome. Hey, Ezekiel, would Texans have rebelled if Santa Ana gave them like 2 grades of fireballs? Almost certainly. All right, I think that is where we call it. Thank you guys so much for joining the stream. This was so much fun. We are going to be doing these long into the future. And don't forget, this will be turned into a podcast episode, which I want to try to get out before the end of the week, if not before the end of this week, before the end of next. And then very shortly, we are going to begin the premieres of the Mexican-American War. It is a 4-part, 4-episode series. They will be premiered, so we'll all be live. And the plan is to also do a live stream immediately following the series, where either I'll play an appropriate video game, like, I don't know, I'll play as Mexico and the United States in Victoria 3, or maybe like we'll re-watch the episode together and I'll give you my director's commentary. If you're not already on the Discord, join the Discord. It's a great way to keep up with us. If you want to become a supporter, every penny counts, I promise, and you will be joining an awesome, awesome community. There will be some nice, soothing outro music. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, y'all.